Husbands and wives that got divorced after 20 years of marriage, what made you decide to change your mind after all that time? Didn't get divorced but started the process after about 25 years. Stuck it out for a few more years for the kids and ended up falling in love with her after the kids moved out. Relationships follow cycles, so glad I stuck it out. Stories like this give me hope. Would love to hear some of your tips on how you made the relationship work again. Find humor in disagreement, within reason. Some issues are serious, but the ones that most often get on people's nerves are usually pretty funny. Tell her you love them, and that you can't wait until you're not angry anymore. Also, eat. And don't keep score. Thank you, kind stranger. Also, eat. My wife's and mine's relationship took a great step for the better when we realized we could just look at each other and go, "You're hangry, aren't you?" Almost always the answer was yes, and then whatever argument fight that was going on was put on hold until we ate and felt better. It's honestly amazing at how being hungry can put you in a bad mood or make you respond into something in a different way than usual. That and a tight ponytail. Never realized how it is so simple, but letting your hair down can be a huge mood changer. I think it's the tension against your scalp. Letting your hair down almost seems like unbuckling a belt. I'm always more easily agitated if under even the most minor physical discomfort. Or like taking off a bra. Don't be hungry, let hair down, unbuckle belt, take off bra. So what I'm getting here is that when you are in a fight with your you too should get naked and eat. Am I getting this right? And then have a nap. A friend of mine was married for nearly 30 years, 2 kids. As she put it, they'd been playing divorce chicken for a decade. There weren't any concrete reasons to get divorced. They didn't fight, they actually got along very well. They just weren't in love anymore. There was always a good pragmatic reason for them to stick together. They co-parented effectively, they actually liked each other, they kept saying their marriage was probably better than a lot of people's. A few years ago they just decided it was time. They went out for drinks and started hashing out how to divide their assets. They agreed on a 50-50 split. They got a lawyer to make everything legit, and a few months later they got divorced. My friend's ex-husband rented a house a few blocks away so the kids could easily walk between mom's and dad's house. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my friend's ex-husband set her up with a new boyfriend. They go on double dates, they go to parent-teacher conferences together. What a refreshingly sensible way to approach such a sensitive issue. Rather than drag it along like so many others, they were able to see that they weren't happy, and even more surprisingly, they didn't hold bitterness and grudges towards each other. I wish all the people who aren't happy in their current life situation could behave so maturely and handle it in such a healthy way. A similar thing happened with my aunt and uncle. Totally amicable, just mutually acknowledged that it didn't really work. They're still close friends. After all, there's a reason they were compatible enough to consider marriage in the first place, but they both just acknowledged that it wasn't the right choice. I feel like so much of the typical angst comes from the stigma associated with both marriage and divorce, old-fashioned mindsets of, well, we got married and agreed to this, so I guess I have to stick it out, not to mention the expectations of marriage that lead people to jump into it even if they're not ready, whether they realize it or not. Not to mention, people change. We act like once you're an adult you are who you are, but even now I'm only 34 and I'm a totally different person than I was at 24. Half of the decisions I made 10 years ago seem ridiculous to me now. I can only imagine how I'll feel when I'm 64, probably looking back at 34-year-old me in the same way. We treat so many other major life changes like they're a mature acknowledgement of changing yourself, changing jobs after multiple decades, going back to school to study something you didn't know you were passionate about before, moving to a new place. I feel like we need to remove the stigma associated with the fact that it's totally possible to maturely decide that a marriage you entered into 20 years ago isn't the best thing for you anymore. I'm 27 and a different person than I was at 23, life definitely changes. Oh, absolutely. Especially with the apparent attitude that once you hit your 20s you're a mature adult. Hell, I changed nearly as much in my 20s as I did in my teens. It's still a period of self-exploration. And honestly, in a healthy person, that self-exploration doesn't end. You'll stabilize a little bit as you find whatever might be your preferred path through life, but that still changes. My dad literally went back to school at 52 to become a high school teacher after nearly 3 decades in the medical field. He had just decided that he'd had enough of that and wanted to do something else with his knowledge. And honestly, I respected that decision immensely. My husband began surreptitiously going to strip clubs. He stole about $200 a week from various accounts and a business I owned to fund these activities. He lost his job because he went there so often at lunch and would just stay. We had young kids and so I stayed after he got some therapy. He was never honest with the therapist. About a year ago I learned he was doing it again. Plus texting strippers. My youngest kid graduates high school this year. I've done what's best for everyone else for 20 years now. This September was 21 years. I don't anticipate having a 22nd anniversary. It's really scary to think of being alone. I don't hate him. I feel sorry for him. I know he will feel very sad and lonely when I'm gone. But being near him feels like having my soul ripped from my body every day. I hope you find some peace. You've been keeping it together for your family for so long. You need to live for you now. My parents split up after nearly 30 years. My dad was an asshole my entire life, so when they finally divorced when I was 18, there was no surprise. Had been cheating for years and I think he was the one who finally asked for it. I think my mom stayed because she couldn't afford to start over. She spent her life putting my dad through school and wasn't educated herself. She had no family or anyone who could help her either. There was definitely some confidence issues on her part too. My parents divorced when I was 12. They thought I'd be devastated, but the only thing I could say was thank God. What took you so long? I don't think I could have endured 6 more years. I wonder if a lot of kids, who have married parents who don't want to be together, feel this way. Edit, just wanted to mention that I'm reading everyone's replies to this. Thank you for sharing your lived experience. I was genuinely curious, as I've seen multiple couples stay together for the kids and it seemed detrimental to everyone in the family. But my parents were never together, so I genuinely didn't know what the kids in those situations might be feeling. FYI, the vast majority of people who replied to me wish their parents would have gotten a divorce sooner, instead of staying together. But I think this perspective is also vitally important. Yukulcham said, I thought I wanted my parents to divorce until they did. I caution anyone wanting their parents to divorce that the kids need to be physically and mentally as safe or safer as a result, and not exposed to more abuse by a parent who has any custody. My parents actually remarried. I always hoped they would come to their senses and get divorced for good. They're still unhappily married and I moved out the week after turning 18. My parents got back together when I was around 6 or 7, up until then I had lived with my dad and my mom had nothing to do with me. When they got together it was nice because I got to live with my 2 older sisters, but I remember desperately wanting them to break up again because of all the fights they got into. Luckily their relationship only lasted a few months or so. Therapy changed my mind. After more than a decade of being miserable I finally got help. When I was able to really talk about my marriage was when I realized that I needed to get the duck out. At the end of the day, I stayed in a shitty marriage because the thought of being alone scared me. Through therapy I was clued into how many wonderfully supportive friends and family members I had if I just reached out to them. I wasn't going to be in a relationship anymore, but I wasn't alone either. My dad had multiple affairs and my mom got tired of it. There was also alcoholism and both parents were workaholics. My dad remarried a lovely woman and so did my mom. Oh, that may have been an issue too. Edit Gold. Thank you, kind stranger. Must be rough when they discover they married the same woman. Sitcom incoming this winter. 2.5 Moms? We were together for 20 years, married for 15. We started as high school sweethearts, but we eventually realized that we weren't the same people we were when we fell in love. We also realized that that wasn't going to change. We decided that the best way for everyone to be happy for the rest of our lives was to end it on peaceful terms before we were both 70 and resentful of each other for trapping each other in an unhappy marriage for 40 plus years. Similar story here. Started dating at 17, got married way too young. By our 30s we were completely different people. At 40 I asked myself, can I do this for the rest of my life? And realized the answer was no. We both have new lives now and eventually each found new partners and are much happier. I think the second time around, especially when you're older, you know exactly what you want and what you are or aren't willing to put up with.